My understanding is children are getting health care there. I think they should get, I'm saddened to hear that report. If that's true, most of the reporting I've seen on these detention centers are that people are getting education and health care. So I, of course...
Well, look, I mean, I think both things can be true at the...
Lee McGowan, also known as Politics Girl, absolutely stole the show on Abby Phillip's CNN panel, and she did it by doing something we don't see nearly enough. She laughed directly in the faces of MAGA goons Kevin O'Leary and Lydia Moynihan. And honestly, it was perfect. Because when you're confronted with absurdity, claims that children in detention centers are getting health care and education, while reports show an 18-month-old nearly died from neglect and a woman hemorrhaged for hours before being seen, sometimes all you can do is laugh at the sheer audacity of the lies. The panel got heated fast, with Lee McGowan and Teslin Figaro pushing back hard on the administration's mass detention plans, facilities holding 10,000 people in towns of 6,000, private prison companies making billions, and children being held indefinitely. The host, Chris on Culture, rightly points out that O'Leary's contradictions are staggering. One minute he's saying, if you broke the law, you're gone. The next he's talking about finding middle ground for farmers who need immigrant labor. Lee McGowan exposed it all with sharp wit and zero patience for the gaslighting. This is how you handle MAGA, with facts, fire, and a well-timed laugh.
I don't know that people really realize what kinds of numbers we are talking about here. We're talking about human beings being detained in these facilities. And it's been so interesting. You know, Social Circle, Georgia, this is one of the latest ones. The entire center is expected to hold 10,000 detainees. That is more than twice the entire population of the town. In Mississippi, Roger Wicker voiced concerns. He's a Republican. He's saying that 8,500 detainees of a town of 1,300 would strain local infrastructure. Hutchinson, Texas, 10,000 people. The city's population is 6,000. First of all, I think my main question is, why are we trying to house, detain, lock up, whatever you want to call it, tens of thousands of people at one time?
Yeah.
Indefinitely, it seems.
Why do we need facilities with 10,000 beds if the point is to deport people? That's an interesting question. Unless they're not planning to deport people.
The answer to that is because they get due process. It takes a little bit of time.
But unless they're not planning to deport people, do you think they're getting due process?
They're supposed to.
And the courts are pushing back hard on that.
Yeah, the courts have said, in fact, that in at least 4,421 cases, more than 400 federal judges say that ICE is holding people illegally. They are not getting due process. That's a real issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's a discredit to DHS and to DOJ that they're not getting people into court. Part of the problem is there's not enough judges, there's not enough facilities here,
and
right?
spend money on that instead of buying huge facilities to house people.
But here's the thing, let's be realistic. For the next 3 years, the Trump administration is going to continue to deport people in large numbers, whether people like it or not. And they're going to be housed somewhere while their cases play out. What's happening now is just as ugly. I mean, ICE and DHS are renting space a lot of times in county jails, in local prisons. They're incredibly overcrowded. I'm not saying this is a great thing, but I'm saying as a reality, as a practical matter, if there's going to be mass arrests and deportations, which there are, like it or not, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have new facilities to house those people, so you're not just cramming them into criminal prisons at the state and county level.
But the facilities they're building are going to be, I mean, the one we know that's been built since we've been in this past administration is what they call alligator Alcatraz, which is, you know, it's a human rights violation waiting to happen every single freaking day there. And that's what they're looking to do, too. They won't let Congress people into the buildings where these facilities already exist. These are private organizations that are making bank off DHS. They're making so much money. We don't have money for education. We don't have money for healthcare. We don't have money for roads. We don't have money for any of that. But we have $38 billion to buy a whole bunch of buildings. And quite frankly, we're overpaying for them. DHS just bought an ICE detention warehouse for $128 million that sold for $29 million 2 years ago. So why are we spending $128 million on it today? These are questions that people need to answer because it seems very peculiar what we're doing, and none of it seems good.
One of the biggest issues is also what's happening with children who are being detained, in a lot of cases, much longer than previously allowed by law. They're really not supposed to be held more than 20 days, and many of them are being held far longer than that. The Times had a piece this weekend that about the Dilley facility, which is one of the most notorious. Last month, an 18-month-old Dilley was taken to a regional children's hospital with dangerously low blood oxygen levels after her parents had begged for weeks for someone at the facility to address her illness. That's according to an emergency petition. A 35-year-old woman was released last week. She said medical staff initially refused to see her after she began hemorrhaging profusely, soaking through 6 sanitary pads in an hour. Eventually, she was taken to a hospital. And last summer, a 32-year-old man died at the Florence Center after being detained at a facility for roughly 3 weeks. Now, that facility is being run by a company called Core Civic, and they have a statement saying Nothing matters more to CoreCivic than the health and safety of the people in our care. He says the facilities routinely pass government inspections, and the reports of substandard care are simply not reflective of the hard work their people do. DHS simply says in a statement, it is a choice to be detained, and people can simply self-deport. But I just ask, are we still good with holding children, some as young as 2 months old, for indefinite amounts of time in any kind of facility that is basically a jail?
Look, I don't like hearing those stories. I want everyone to be safe and get the health care and what they need. I think it is a reminder, though, that we frankly don't have the resources to provide health care for the millions of illegal people who came in here. And on the other point of people sort of complaining about
You mean
these
in the jails or
detention
just in
centers,
general?
just in general. It's interesting. I mean, for years, the media ignored these stories about people who were complaining, whether it was in Texas on a border state or Springfield, Ohio, of immigrants who were flooding their towns and they didn't have resources at all.
But you're being asked
and
about
it's
children in
and
a
it's
detention
interesting
center,
that
not
that was
about
never
immigrants
covered.
taking healthcare.
And now
That was covered.
it,
It was covered.
it was ridiculed. People who
It was definitely covered.
people who were
It was
trying to
covered.
erect the
We
border
covered it.
The question
walls
is,
in
should
their
we be keeping
facility
children in
Texas.
detention facilities without the proper health care?
I think I would like, my understanding is children are getting health care there.
Or
I think
not.
they should get, I'm saddened to hear of that report. If that's true, most of the reporting I've seen on these detention centers are that people are getting education and health care. So I, of course,
Well, look, I mean, I think both things can be true at the same time. It is.
We're getting education
I
in these
would
detention
blame
centers?
these
I don't
parents,
want
though,
to
for putting their children in this position.
Hold on. Look, there are at least some cases. There's one case where a family had, during the Biden administration, had come through the CBP-1 app. They had been inspected. They had gone through the application. They were told they could come into the country, and now they are being detained with their young child in a detention facility. Now, you can disagree with the actions of the Biden administration, but what is the point of punishing children for their parents doing something that was the illegal process at the time and putting them in, again, regardless of how many nurses they have or books they have in these facilities, these are jails.
Abby, when you're dealing
right?
with millions of people, there's always
the point
going
of
to be
that?
horrific stories like this. That's not going to stop. I think a bigger issue
but you
is
realize
there,
that the
is there a
the
middle
scale
ground
is an
in
issue here,
Listen
right?
to this. I mean, I talked to a farmer from Iowa last week while I was in Florida, and he told me that if we threw out all of the people that work on his farms, we wouldn't eat anymore. And so what he's asking for is say, wait a second, if this person came into the country, is supporting a family, never broke a law, is there some kind of middle ground to help him get his papers as a citizen, perhaps, while he works and feeds America? That was his question. I said,
It's a good question, but
it is a
Trump
good question.
promised
It makes
mass
sense.
deportation.
Remember, if you broke a law, if you actually are found in, I don't know, ICE or some other law enforcement entity, and you clearly came here illegally and you broke a law, I'm sorry, you're gone. You may have to stop in one of these facilities, but Trump campaigned on this mandate, and the general public agreed when he came in that he would enforce these rules against illegal immigrants. But if the ones that did this came in illegally and broke the law, they have to be treated differently.
But Kevin, which one are
like
you,
this.
though? Is it the man who has the farmers that have a way, or is it the people that are coming in illegally and are committing crimes? Because those are two different people that you were
That's what I just
talking
said.
about.
So you should process the ones that have clearly off mandate. They've committed crimes and they came in illegally.
Agreed.
All right.
Meanwhile, find some middle ground to help the farmer feed everybody.
Immigration
Teslin, go
reform.
ahead.
That would be
Yes.
great.
I just want to stop pretending like we just treat everybody so well, in our prison system, including, those who are American citizens. There's a documentary right now, about the Alabama inmates I'm sure you've seen on how they're being treated, within our facilities. Let's stop acting like there's not something called the
American
private.
citizens
Yes, American
that
citizens.
break the law and go to
No,
prison?
everybody doesn't always break the law and go to prison. See, that's where you've been so focused on the Dow and haven't been focused on what's actually happening.
I'm focused on breaking the law.
No.
You shouldn't break the law if you want to stay out of prison.
Focus on something called due process and focus on people who get incarcerated before they're actually found guilty. Something called where people can't
So
afford
you're okay
bail.
if somebody murders
no,
somebody
I didn't say
and they
that.
shouldn't
I didn't
go
say
to
nothing
prison.
about no murder. Here you go
How
again,
about
picking
that?
up. Well,
You said
I'll
break
give
the
you a
law.
real time.
All
No,
right,
I didn't
let me
say
just
break
let
the law.
Teslin finish
I said
real quick.
that
We're almost out of time.
Everybody don't break the law and just go to prison. It doesn't work that way. It may work that way. It may work that way. Yeah, they absolutely do.
Do they get a trial first? I think
Breaking
they do,
news.
actually.
No, they don't. See, that's where you're getting
Oh,
confused.
we're not in
That's where
America
you-
anymore.
That's right. Now you finally got
Good
a
for
round
you.
of applause.
What country are you
Now
talking
you finally
about?
the country that I've been living in, that my
Show me
ancestors have been in.
that is
We can
not
go
how
through-
America works.
Oh, see, that
That's
hasn't how
why-
it worked for
All
you.
right, Kevin,
That's how
Kevin.
it hasn't worked for you.
Kevin, hang on a
Goes
second.
back to the Dow.
Is we have an appellate
It hasn't
process.
worked for
Kevin, hang on
you.
a
See,
second.
that's the system that has
Kevin,
worked
I
for
don't
you.
break the
That's
law.
not the system that
We are
hasn't
getting
worked for me.
derailed. Just a
Yeah, because we're
second.
getting
Just a
derailed and we're
second.
really about to go there. So let's.
All right, we're just talking
feeling
about,
good about that
we're talking
conversation.
about a
I'm
lot of
feeling good
different
about it
things
as well.
here. Okay, she's making a legitimate point that some people stay imprisoned even when they're not having a trial, and that's a
You don't want to
controversial
go to
issue.
prison? Don't break the law.
Okay.
See, this is where
it's
he
called
gets
innocent
confused.
until proven
Right.
guilty. That is a
And
principle.
you get
that
a
exists
trial
this
in America.
country.
Yes, but Kevin,
Exactly.
we have the
All right.
highest prison population in the
Yes,
world.
we
It
do.
is a giant moneymaker for the prison industrial
Then
complex.
let's open
and if
the
you are
gates
paid
and let
per
everybody
prisoner,
out again and start again.
Oh my
All right, we
God,
gotta
there
go,
you go
my friend.
again. And yes, then let's have no prisons at all. That's what I'm
Coming
going
up
to say.
for us, a federal judge has invoked the dystopian.
Lee McGowan's laugh on CNN wasn't just a moment of comic relief. It was a strategic weapon against the gaslighting machine that MAGA has perfected. When Lydia Moynihan sat there with a straight face and claimed children in detention centers are getting health care and education, while we have documented evidence of an 18-month-old nearly dying from neglect and a woman hemorrhaging for hours before being seen, laughter is the only appropriate response to that level of depraved dishonesty. Moynihan and Kevin O'Leary are not confused or misinformed. They are willfully spreading propaganda to normalize the inhumanity of this administration's detention policies. And Lee McGowan saw right through it. The math alone exposes the lie. The administration is building facilities that hold 10,000 detainees in towns with populations of 6,000 people, spending $128 million on a warehouse that sold for $29 million just 2 years ago, and funneling billions to private prison companies like Core Civic while claiming we don't have the resources for healthcare or education. Meanwhile, ICE is holding people illegally. Over 4,400 federal judges have ruled that detainees are not receiving due process, and children are being kept far beyond the legal 20-day limit. This isn't immigration enforcement. It's a for-profit detention machine that treats human beings as revenue streams. And the only thing standing between them and total impunity is people like Lee McGowan and Teslin Figaro, who refuse to let the lies slide. Kevin O'Leary's contradictions were staggering, and Lee McGowan exposed every single one. He claims undocumented immigrants broke the law and therefore must be deported, then immediately pivots to say we need middle ground for the farmers who rely on immigrant labor to feed the country. He wants it both ways, tough on immigration when it plays to the base, but pragmatic when it threatens the economy. But here's the reality O'Leary won't acknowledge. Undocumented immigrants commit crimes at lower rates than native-born citizens, and most of them didn't cross the border illegally. They overstayed visas, which is a civil violation, not a criminal offense. And even if they did cross, we're talking about families fleeing violence and poverty, not hardened criminals. The distinction matters, and O'Leary's deliberate conflation of the two is a tired, dishonest talking point. The private prison industrial complex is the real story here, and Lee McGowan rightly hammered that point home. DHS is spending $38 billion on detention infrastructure, while schools are underfunded, roads are crumbling, and healthcare is unaffordable for millions of Americans. Core Civic claims nothing matters more than the health and safety of the people in our care, but we have court documents showing medical neglect, death, and suffering in their facilities. This isn't about border security, it's about profit margins. Every person detained is a customer, every day they're held is revenue, and every new facility is an investment in human misery. And the fact that Republicans like Roger Wicker are now raising concerns about infrastructure strain in their towns tells you everything you need to know. It's only a problem when it affects their constituents, not when it's happening to brown people they don't have to see. Teslin Figaro also delivered a knockout punch when she called out O'Leary's just don't break the law nonsense. She reminded him that the U.S. has the highest prison population in the world, that people sit in jail without trial because they can't afford bail, and that the innocent until proven guilty ideal doesn't apply equally to everyone, especially poor people and people of color. O'Leary tried to pivot to let's just let everyone out, a classic strawman designed to make her sound extreme. But Figaro didn't bite. She stayed focused on the issue. Detention centers are worse than prisons, and people who haven't been convicted of any crime shouldn't be locked up in human warehouses run by corporations that profit from suffering. That's not extreme. That's basic humanity. And let's be honest about the broader picture here. This is the same administration that fast-tracked white Afrikaners while locking up black and brown families. This is the same administration that calls journalists enemies of the people while pretending to care about the free press. This is the same administration that wraps itself in the flag and the Bible while building concentration camp-style facilities and treating children like inventory. The hypocrisy is staggering, but it's not accidental. It's the entire strategy. Flood the zone with cruelty, profit from the chaos, and gaslight anyone who dares to look closely. Lee McGowan's laugh was a rejection of that strategy. It said, I see what you're doing, and I'm not buying it. So here's the bottom line. We have a choice. We can accept the normalization of these detention centers, The profiteering off human suffering and the lies about children getting health care while they're literally dying in custody. Or we can do what Lee McGowan, Teslin Figaro, and Abby Phillip did. Refuse to look away, refuse to be gaslit, and refuse to treat this as anything other than the moral crisis it is. These are families. These are children. These are human beings with rights and dignity, and no amount of corporate PR or MAGA spin changes that. We keep saying their names. We keep sharing the truth. We keep laughing in the face of the lies, because that's how we win. Not by accepting the unacceptable, but by refusing every single day to pretend this is normal. It's not. It never will be, and we won't stop saying it.